Sarah watches from her kitchen window as the neighbors climb her fence again, the third time this week. Her pulse quickens. They think she doesn't know. They think she's just the quiet, divorced woman next door who won't make waves. But tonight, she's done being nice. Tonight, she's armed with a camera, a lawyer's number, and a plan that will make them wish they'd never set foot on her property. Because what they don't know about Sarah Miller could destroy everything they've built. Sarah Miller's hands trembled as she gripped her coffee mug, watching through the kitchen window as another float bobbed in her pool. She hadn't put it there. She never put anything in her pool anymore. Not since the divorce, not since this house became her refuge instead of her prison. The Hendersons, it was always the Hendersons. She'd moved to Maple Ridge 2 years ago, desperate for a fresh start after 23 years of marriage collapsed like a house of cards. The neighborhood seemed perfect. Quiet streets, mature trees, the kind of place where people kept to themselves. Exactly what she needed. Then the Hendersons moved in next door 6 months ago. Marcus and Brittany Henderson were everything Sarah wasn't. Young, beautiful, successful. He owned 3 car dealerships across the state. She ran some kind of lifestyle blog that had made her Instagram famous. They threw parties every weekend, their perfectly curated friends spilling across their manicured lawn like they owned the entire street. Sarah wouldn't have cared. She would have been happy to ignore them completely. But they couldn't ignore her pool. It started small. She'd find beer bottles floating in the water after their parties. Then it was cigarette butts scattered across her deck. She'd clean them up without saying anything, telling herself it was probably an accident, wind carrying trash over the fence. Then she caught them. 2 months ago, she'd come home early from her shift at the hospital. She worked nights as a nurse, and found Marcus and 3 of his friends doing cannonballs off her diving board at 3 in the afternoon. They'd cut through her fence. Actually cut through the wooden slats at the back corner where the properties met, hidden behind her garden shed. When she confronted them, Marcus had laughed, actually laughed in her face. "Relax, Sarah, we're just having fun, your pool's just sitting here empty. What's the harm?" "The harm is it's private property, my property." Brittany had appeared then, drink in hand, perfect smile plastered across her face. "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. We'll pay to fix the fence." "Marcus, tell her we'll fix it." Yeah, we'll fix it. Jesus, take a chill pill." They never fixed it. And they never stopped using her pool. Sarah had called the police that first time. Officer Rodriguez had been sympathetic but ultimately useless. "Did you actually see them damage the fence, ma'am?" "Well, no, but—" "And you're saying they admitted to using your pool?" "Yes, right to my face." "But you don't have that recorded." "I didn't think to record a conversation on my own property." Rodriguez had sighed. "Look, I understand your frustration, but without proof of the damage or trespassing, this is really a civil matter. You might want to consider installing security cameras. In the meantime, I'll go have a talk with them." The talk had accomplished nothing. Marcus answered the door in swim trunks, wet footprints trailing behind him, and denied everything. Said they'd been swimming in their own pool all day. Never mind that the Hendersons didn't have a pool, just a hot tub on their deck. After the police left, Sarah had stood in her backyard, staring at the gap in her fence, and felt something inside her harden. She'd spent the next 2 months gathering evidence. 4 wireless cameras hidden in trees and mounted under her eaves. She'd learned more about surveillance equipment in 60 days than she'd learned in her entire life. Motion sensors, night vision, cloud storage backup. She'd spent nearly $3,000, money she couldn't really afford, documenting every single intrusion. And there had been many. The Hendersons used her pool at least twice a week, sometimes more. They'd swim at night after their parties, dozens of drunk people treating her backyard like their personal resort. They'd swim during the day when she was at work. They'd even swim in the early morning before dawn when they thought she'd be asleep. Her cameras caught everything: faces, license plates of their friends' cars, time stamps, crystal clear video of them cutting through her fence, using her pool furniture, even grilling food on her deck. Sarah had taken it all to a lawyer. Jonathan Reeves was a bulldog of an attorney, late 50s, with a reputation for crushing property dispute cases. He'd listened to her story, watched her videos, and smiled like a shark scenting blood. "Mrs. Miller, you have an absolutely airtight case. Trespassing, property damage. You could pursue criminal charges and civil damages. I'd estimate you could easily win 50,000, maybe more with the right jury. They've been documented using your property as their own for months. That's not a one-time mistake. That's a pattern of deliberate violation. How long will it take? To file, I can have the paperwork ready in a week. To go to trial, probably 8 to 12 months. Sarah had felt her stomach drop. A year. At minimum, could be longer. Courts are backlogged, but trust me, we'll win. She'd thanked him and left without hearing him. She couldn't wait a year. She couldn't afford to wait a year, not financially and not emotionally. Every violation felt like Marcus and Brittany were grinding their heels into what little dignity she had left. That's when Sarah started planning something else entirely. She'd spent 3 weeks researching. City ordinances, property laws, liability statutes. She read case after case, looking for precedents, loopholes, angles nobody else had considered. And then she found it. A case from 2019 in California. A homeowner had sued neighbors for using their pool without permission. But the neighbors had countersued, claiming the pool was an attractive nuisance, arguing that the homeowner was liable for not properly securing something that could attract and endanger others, especially children. The homeowner had lost. Sarah had read that verdict 3 times, her mind racing. Then she'd started reading about attractive nuisance law in her own state. The doctrine existed here too, and it gave her an idea so perfectly vindictive that she'd actually laughed out loud in her empty living room. If the Hendersons wanted to use her pool so badly, she'd let them. But first, she was going to make absolutely certain they'd pay for the privilege. Sarah stood from her kitchen table now, watching another Henderson party spill into her backyard. Brittany's distinctive laugh carried across the fence. Sarah checked her phone. All 4 cameras were recording. She walked to her garage and pulled out the signs she'd printed that morning. 5 of them, large and laminated, with letters big enough to read from 20 feet away. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be PROSSUTD. Survivors will be PROSSUTD again. She zip-tied them to her fence at regular intervals, making sure they were clearly visible from every angle the Hendersons typically entered her yard. Then she went inside, opened her laptop, and sent an email to Jonathan Reeves. Mr. Reeves, I'd like to hire you after all, but I need you to wait exactly 30 days before filing anything. I'll explain why when we meet. In the meantime, I need you to draft the most comprehensive property violation lawsuit you can imagine. I want every possible charge, every possible penalty, every possible dollar. I'm not looking for justice anymore. I'm looking for annihilation. Sarah Miller. She hit send and poured herself a glass of wine. Outside, she heard a splash, followed by drunken cheering. Sarah smiled. Let them swim, let them drink. Let them think they'd gotten away with it. In 30 days, the Hendersons were going to learn that some people, the quiet ones, the ones who seemed like they wouldn't fight back, were the most dangerous of all. The next morning, Marcus Henderson stood in his driveway, staring at Sarah's fence with his jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. The signs hadn't been there yesterday, he was sure of it. What a bitch, Brittany said from beside him, her yoga mat tucked under one arm. She'd paused mid-stride on her way to her car, equally transfixed by the aggressive display. She knows we were just having fun. God, she's so uptight. Marcus barely heard her. He was doing calculations in his head, risk assessment. He'd built his dealership empire by knowing when to push and when to back off, when to call someone's bluff and when to fold. This felt like a bluff. Sarah Miller was a middle-aged, divorced nurse who lived alone and worked night shifts. She'd called the cops once, and they'd done nothing. She'd probably put up the signs to scare them, make them think she was serious about enforcing her boundaries. But Marcus knew people. Weak people folded when you pushed back harder, and Sarah Miller seemed very, very weak. Forget the signs, he said, kissing Brittany on the cheek. She's just trying to make a point. She'll get over it. Should we actually stop using her pool? Marcus looked at his wife like she'd suggested he stop breathing. Are you kidding? It's 90 degrees this week. Our hot tub is tiny. Besides, we've been using it for months and nothing's happened. She's not going to do anything. But the signs are just signs. Trust me, babe, I know how to handle people like her. Brittany shrugged and got in her Range Rover. Marcus watched her pull out of the driveway, then glanced back at Sarah's house. No movement in the windows. She was probably asleep after her shift. He pulled out his phone and texted the group chat for his weekly poker game. Pool party at my place Friday night. BYOB, and bring your swimsuits. Then he went to work, already forgetting about the signs entirely. Sarah watched Marcus's text thread through her laptop screen, her hands steady on her coffee mug. Installing spyware on someone's phone was illegal. She knew that. She also knew that when Marcus had come over 3 months ago to apologize for using her pool, he'd left his phone on her kitchen counter for 6 minutes while he used her bathroom. 6 minutes was all she'd needed. The app she'd installed was invisible, undetectable without a factory reset. It forwarded her copies of every text, email, and call. It tracked his location. It even let her turn on his microphone and camera remotely. Was it illegal? Absolutely. Would she ever use it in court? Never. But it gave her something far more valuable than legal evidence. It gave her perfect intelligence. She knew every move the Hendersons planned before they made it. And Friday's pool party was exactly what she'd been waiting for. Sarah opened a new document on her laptop and started typing. The email went to her insurance company, carefully worded, innocent. Dear State Farm, I'm writing regarding my homeowner's policy, 458298473321. I wanted to verify my coverage in the event of an injury on my property. Specifically, if someone were to trespass and injure themselves in my pool despite clear posted warnings, would I have any liability? I've recently discovered that neighbors have been accessing my property without permission. I've posted multiple, no trespassing, signs as of today's date to clearly indicate my pool area is private and restricted. Please advise on my coverage and any additional steps I should take to protect myself from liability. Thank you, Sarah Miller. She hit send, then made copies of the email for her records. Time-stamped, documented proof that she'd notified her insurance company about trespassers and taken reasonable steps to prevent access. Next, she called a pool maintenance company. Hi, yes, I need to schedule a service call. My pool needs to be drained and the tile needs repair work. Yes, I know it's short notice. Friday afternoon would be perfect. No, I don't need to be home. I'll leave the gate unlocked. Just lock it behind you when you're done. The appointment was set for 4 p.m. Friday. Marcus's party started at 7 p.m. Her pool would be completely empty. Sarah allowed herself a small smile, but she wasn't done. She spent the next hour photographing her fence from every angle, documenting the cuts the Hendersons had made, the wear patterns around the damaged sections, the footprints in her flower beds. She took measurements. She got quotes from 3 different fence companies for repairs. $4,200 for a full replacement of the damaged section. She saved every estimate, every email, every receipt. Then she drove to the courthouse and filed for a temporary restraining order against the Hendersons. She brought her videos, her photos, her documentation. A clerk helped her fill out the paperwork. The judge will review this within 72 hours, the clerk said. If approved, the respondents will be served and must cease all contact and maintain distance from your property. And if they violate it, then it becomes a criminal matter. They can be arrested. Perfect. Sarah left the courthouse feeling lighter than she had in months. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes, each one positioned to knock down the next. Friday afternoon, she watched from her bedroom window as the pool maintenance truck pulled up. 2 workers spent 90 minutes draining her pool, the water flowing into the storm drains in the street. When they finished, her pool was nothing but an empty concrete basin, 8 feet deep, the drain cover visible at the bottom. At 6 p.m., she left for work, making sure her cameras were armed and recording. At 7:15 p.m., sitting in the hospital break room on her dinner break, she pulled up the camera feeds on her phone. Marcus Henderson was cutting through her fence with bolt cutters. Sarah's heart raced as she watched him widen the gap, then hold it open as partygoers started filing through. She counted them, 12 people total, all carrying drinks, all laughing and stumbling in the twilight. She watched Marcus walk up to her pool deck, watched him gesture grandly toward the water. And then she watched his face change as he realized the pool was empty. Someone screamed. Someone else started laughing hysterically. Marcus stood frozen, staring down into the empty basin like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. Then his head snapped toward her house. Sarah couldn't hear through the camera, but she could read lips well enough. That crazy bitch drained her pool. He pulled out his phone, and Sarah knew he was texting his friends, telling them the party was ruined, that his neighbor was psychotic. She watched them file back through the fence, disappointed and confused. But 3 stayed behind. Marcus and 2 of his friends. She recognized them from previous videos, regulars at his parties. Tyler and Josh, both in their late 20s, both drunk. Sarah leaned forward, watching intently. Marcus was gesturing at the fence, animated, angry. Tyler was nodding. Josh was looking at Sarah's house. Then Marcus pulled something from his pocket. A can of spray paint. Sarah watched, barely breathing, as Marcus walked to her back door and spray painted across the white wood in huge red letters. "Psycho bitch." He stepped back, admiring his work, while Tyler and Josh laughed. Then all 3 of them walked to different parts of her yard and urinated on her lawn furniture, her garden, her deck. Sarah calmly took screenshots of every angle, every face, every action. The timestamps were clear. The videos were crystal clear, even in the low light. She downloaded the files to her phone, uploaded backup copies to her cloud storage, and sent the entire package to Jonathan Reeves with a simple message. "Add vandalism and destruction of property to the lawsuit, and I'm ready to file now. File everything Monday morning." Then she called the police. 911, what's your emergency? "I need to report vandalism in progress at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. 3 men are destroying my property. I have them on video. They're still here. Officers are on the way. Are you in a safe location?" "I'm not home, I'm at work, but I'm watching it happen on my security cameras." "Stay on the line, ma'am." Sarah watched as 2 patrol cars pulled up 12 minutes later. Watched as Marcus, Tyler, and Josh tried to run. Watched as officers tackled Josh in her backyard, handcuffed Tyler against her fence, and cornered Marcus trying to climb over into his own yard. She watched the officers photograph the spray paint. Watched them walk through her property, documenting the damage. Watched them put all 3 men in separate patrol cars. When Officer Rodriguez called her 20 minutes later, she almost didn't recognize his voice. "Mrs. Miller, this is Officer Rodriguez. I owe you an apology. We just arrested Marcus Henderson and 2 others for criminal mischief and trespassing on your property. I should have taken your complaint more seriously the first time." "It's all right, officer. You told me to get cameras, I got cameras." "These cameras are very thorough. The DA is going to have a field day with this evidence, and I saw all those previous videos you've compiled. How long has this been going on?" "Months. I documented everything." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Miller, off the record, nail them to the wall." "I intend to." She hung up and sat back in her break room chair, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was starting to fade. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You're going to regret this, you miserable bitch. We'll make your life hell." Sarah screenshot the text, forwarded it to the police and her lawyer, and then blocked the number. Then she went back to work, checking on her patients, taking vitals, administering medication. Just another Friday night shift. But when she checked her phone an hour later, she had an email from Jonathan Reeves. "Sarah, I'm filing Monday morning. Criminal charges are already moving forward. The DA called me directly. They're very interested in your videos. But the civil case is going to be spectacular. With this level of documentation, we're not looking at $50,000 anymore. We're looking at $200,000, maybe more, property damage, emotional distress, punitive damages for the pattern of behavior. The spray paint message gives us grounds for harassment. The Hendersons are about to have a very bad year." "Jonathan." Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel it. The victory, the vindication, the bone-deep satisfaction of watching bullies face consequences for the first time in their entitled lives. She thought about Marcus's face when he realized the pool was empty. She thought about him in handcuffs, trying to explain to police why he was spray painting profanity on someone else's property. She thought about Brittany getting that phone call. And she smiled. This was just the beginning. Brittany Henderson sat in the police station waiting room at 11 p.m. on Friday night, her Instagram-perfect composure cracking like fine china. The officer at the desk had been polite but firm. Marcus was being processed. No, she couldn't see him yet. Yes, he would be allowed one phone call. No, she couldn't bail him out until he was arraigned, which wouldn't happen until Monday morning. Monday, Brittany's voice had climbed an octave. He has to stay here all weekend. That's how it works, ma'am. Judge doesn't do arraignments on weekends except for violent crimes. Vandalism, trespassing, criminal mischief. The officer had rattled off the charges like he was reading a grocery list, and Brittany had felt her perfectly constructed world tilting on its axis. This was Sarah Miller's fault, that bitter, jealous woman who couldn't stand seeing other people happy, who couldn't stand that Brittany and Marcus had everything, youth, money, success, beauty, while she had nothing but an empty house and a dead-end job. Brittany pulled out her phone and did what she always did when life got difficult. She posted about it. The photo was perfect, her in the police station waiting room, artfully disheveled, eyes glistening with carefully applied tears. The caption wrote itself. When your neighbor's jealousy goes too far, my husband is being held on false charges because we accidentally used her pool a few times. She's literally ruining our lives over water. This is what happens when bitter people have too much time on their hands. Pray for us. Folded, broken, neighbor from hell, false accusations, justice for Marcus. She hit post and watched the likes and comments start rolling in immediately. Her 47,000 followers were nothing if not loyal. OMG, that's insane. She sounds psycho, so sorry you're dealing with this. Some people are just miserable and want everyone else to be miserable too. Have you thought about suing her? Brittany smiled through her tears. Yes, that was exactly what they'd do. They'd sue Sarah Miller for harassment, for emotional distress, for ruining Marcus's reputation. They'd make her regret ever. Her phone rang, unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Henderson? This is Jennifer Morales from Channel 7 News. I saw your Instagram post about being arrested for using your neighbor's pool. We'd love to do a story on this. Would you be available for an on-camera interview? Brittany's heart soared. This was perfect. Public sympathy, media coverage. Sarah Miller wouldn't know what hit her. Yes, Brittany breathed. Yes, I'd love to tell our side of the story. Sarah got the call from Officer Rodriguez at 6 a.m. Saturday morning, just as she was getting home from her shift. Mrs. Miller, I wanted to give you a heads up. Brittany Henderson is doing a media interview this morning. Channel 7 News. She's claiming you falsely accused her husband and that this is all a misunderstanding over accidentally using your pool. Sarah felt ice water in her veins. She's going on the news. Yep, they're filming at noon. I just thought you should know in case you want to. Prepare. Prepare how? Rodriguez's voice took on a careful tone. Well, you have pretty compelling video evidence. If they're going to tell their story in the media, you might want to tell yours. Just a thought. Sarah hung up and immediately called Jonathan Reeves. He answered on the second ring, sounding wide awake despite the early hour. I saw the Instagram post. She's making a mistake. She's going on the news, Jonathan. I know, I already called Channel 7, told them we'd be happy to provide the other side of the story, complete with video evidence. Can we do that? Won't it compromise the case? The criminal case is already filed. The videos are already evidence, and Mrs. Henderson opened this door herself by going public. She could hear the smile in his voice. Sometimes, Sarah, you let your opponent dig their own grave, then you just have to know when to bury them. At 11:45 a.m., Sarah sat in her living room, watching Channel 7 News set up in the Hendersons' front yard through her window. Jennifer Morales, the reporter, was young and eager, the kind who'd chase any dramatic story. Brittany had changed into a soft pink dress, minimal makeup, the picture of a wronged innocent. Sarah watched her dab at her eyes before the camera started rolling. Then Sarah's phone rang. Mrs. Miller, this is Jennifer Morales from Channel 7. We understand you're the neighbor in question. Would you like to provide comment? I would, and I have video evidence you might be interested in seeing. There was a pause. Video evidence? Of everything, every trespassing incident, every act of vandalism, everything. Would you like to see it before you air your story? Another pause, longer this time. We're actually already set up here at the Hendersons' residence, but I can email you the files right now. All of them. Time-stamped, high-definition footage. I wouldn't want you to air a story without all the facts. Sarah could practically hear the reporter's journalistic instincts kicking in. Send them over. Give me your email address. Sarah spent the next hour watching the news crew's body language change through her window. She watched Jennifer Morales hunched over her phone, scrolling through video after video. She watched the cameraman lean in, his expression shifting from curious to shocked. She watched Brittany's confident smile start to falter. At 1:30 p.m., the news van pulled away without filming anything. At 2:00 p.m., Brittany Henderson was at Sarah's front door, pounding hard enough to rattle the frame. Sarah opened it with the chain still attached, looking through the gap at her neighbor's tear-streaked, furious face. "You ruined everything," Brittany screamed. "They're not running my story. They said the videos show we're lying, that we've been trespassing for months." "Because you have been. It was just a pool, just water. Why are you doing this to us?" Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "You want to know why? Because you took something that wasn't yours, over and over again. Because when I asked you to stop, you laughed in my face. Because you made me feel small and powerless in my own home. And because people like you need to learn that actions have consequences." "Marcus could go to jail." "Yes, he could. We'll sue you. We'll take everything you have." Sarah smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "You're welcome to try, but you might want to talk to a lawyer first. I already have one, and he's very, very good." She closed the door in Brittany's face and listened to her neighbor scream obscenities through the wood before finally storming away. Sarah went to her kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, her hands steady. Through the window, she could see Brittany in her own driveway, on the phone, gesturing wildly. Sarah's phone buzzed, an email from Jennifer Morales. "Mrs. Miller, thank you for providing those videos. After reviewing them, we've decided not to run the Henderson story as they presented it. However, we would like to run a story about property rights and trespassing in suburban neighborhoods if you'd be willing to be interviewed. Your documentation is some of the most thorough I've seen. We'd protect your identity if you prefer. Let me know. Jennifer." Sarah stared at the email for a long moment, then typed a reply. "Jennifer, I'd be happy to do an interview, and you don't need to protect my identity. I want people to know exactly who I am and what the Hendersons did. I'm done being invisible." "Sarah." Marcus Henderson sat on a concrete bench in a holding cell, his head in his hands, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. 72 hours ago, he'd been on top of the world. Successful businessman, beautiful wife, perfect life. Sure, he'd bent a few rules, used someone else's pool without asking, but so what? It wasn't like he'd hurt anyone. Now he was looking at criminal charges, a lawsuit and social media backlash that was spreading like wildfire. Someone had leaked the videos. He didn't know who, maybe the police, maybe Sarah's lawyer, maybe Sarah herself. But by Saturday afternoon, edited clips were all over Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Marcus Henderson, successful car dealership owner, spray painting psycho bitch on his neighbor's door. Marcus Henderson urinating on someone else's property while his friends laughed. Marcus Henderson cutting through a fence with bolt cutters. The comments were brutal. "What an entitled asshole. This is why I hate rich people. Hope he loses everything. That poor woman was just trying to protect her property." Brittany's Instagram post had been torn apart. People had found her other posts, the ones showing off their lifestyle, their parties, their wealth, and turned them into evidence of privilege and entitlement. Someone had even dug up old posts where she'd complained about poor people not knowing their place. His phone, confiscated when he was arrested, was probably exploding with messages from business partners, friends, family, all wanting to know what the hell was going on. By Sunday morning, when Tyler's father, a prominent attorney, laid all three of them out, the damage was catastrophic. Marcus walked out of the police station into a wall of camera flashes. 3 news crews, multiple reporters shouting questions. "Mr. Henderson, why did you vandalize your neighbor's property? Is it true you've been trespassing for months? What do you say to people calling you entitled and privileged?" Marcus put his head down and pushed through to Tyler's father's car, saying nothing. But he knew the footage would be everywhere by evening. In the car, Tyler's father, Gerald, didn't mince words. "You're an idiot, Marcus, a complete and total idiot." "I know, No, you don't know. You have no idea how screwed you are. I've seen the videos. I've seen the police reports. I've spoken to the DA. They're throwing the book at you. It's just trespassing and vandalism. It's a pattern of criminal behavior documented over months. It's property damage. It's harassment. And your wife's little social media stunt just made sure every prosecutor in the state knows exactly who you are." Gerald's jaw was tight. "The DA wants to make an example of you." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean?" "It means you're not getting a slap on the wrist. You're looking at fines, community service, maybe probation, and that's just the criminal case." Gerald glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "The civil suit is going to be worse." "How much worse?" "6 figures, easily. Maybe more depending on how much the jury hates you. And right now, thanks to those videos, everyone hates you." They drove in silence until Gerald dropped him off at his house. Brittany was waiting, her eyes red and swollen. "Our sponsors dropped us," she said without preamble. "All of them. 3 brands I've worked with for years just sent termination emails. They don't want to be associated with us anymore." Marcus felt like he was falling. How much were those contracts worth? $40,000 per year. He sat down heavily on their expensive couch. Jesus Christ. "It gets worse." Brittany's voice was hollow. "Someone sent the videos to the Better Business Bureau and the Dealership Association. Your reputation is being destroyed, Marcus. People are saying they'll never buy a car from someone who treats their neighbors like this." Marcus thought about his dealerships, the carefully cultivated image, the customer relationships, the trust. All of it was unraveling. "We need to fix this," he said. "We need to apologize, make it right." "It's too late for that. I tried to message Sarah this morning. She blocked me. I tried to call, she blocked that too." Marcus pulled out his phone, finally returned to him, and saw the damage. Hundreds of missed calls, thousands of Instagram comments, almost all negative. His business email inbox was flooded with cancellations, complaints, people saying they'd take their business elsewhere. One email made his blood run cold. It was from his largest investor, the one who'd funded his 3rd dealership. "Marcus, given recent events and the associated publicity, I'm exercising the morality clause in our contract. I'm withdrawing my investment, effective immediately. You have 30 days to buy me out or I'll force a sale. This is not negotiable." Robert Chen. Marcus did the math in his head. Buying out Chen meant coming up with $800,000 in 30 days. Money he didn't have liquid. Money he'd have to borrow against his other dealerships. If he could even get a loan, given his current situation. "We're ruined," Brittany whispered, "aren't we?" Marcus couldn't answer. He just sat there, staring at his phone, watching his perfect life crumble in real time. And somewhere across the fence in her quiet house, Sarah Miller was watching it happen. Monday morning, Jonathan Reeves filed a civil lawsuit against Marcus and Brittany Henderson, seeking $275,000 in damages. The breakdown was methodical, devastating. $4,200 for fence repairs, $12,000 for pool maintenance and cleaning, documented contamination from unauthorized use, $8,000 for property damage, spray paint removal, deck refinishing, landscape restoration, $50,000 for emotional distress, $200,000 in punitive damages. The complaint was 47 pages long, meticulously detailed, and included links to a private server where the videos were stored for review by the court. By Tuesday afternoon, it was public record. By Wednesday morning, it was viral. Sarah sat in a coffee shop 3 towns over, laptop open, reading through the online reaction. She'd learned quickly that staying home meant dealing with reporters camped on her street, so she'd started working remotely from various locations, always keeping her cameras trained on her house. The internet had divided into 2 camps. Camp 1, Sarah was a hero, a regular person standing up to entitled rich neighbors who thought rules didn't apply to them. Comment sections were flooded with stories of similar situations, nightmare neighbors, property violations, people who refused to respect boundaries. Sarah had become a symbol. Camp 2, Sarah was vindictive and cruel. Yes, the Hendersons were wrong, but did they really deserve to have their entire lives destroyed over a swimming pool? Some comments called her obsessive, unhinged, said she'd taken it too far. Sarah read both with equal detachment. She'd stopped caring what strangers thought. But one comment thread caught her attention. Someone claiming to be a former employee at one of Marcus's dealerships. Y'all don't know the half of it. Marcus Henderson treats his employees like garbage. I worked there for 2 years and saw him scream at salespeople in front of customers, dock pay for being 1 minute late, fire a single mom because she asked for time off when her kid was sick. He's a bully who got away with it because he's rich. Glad someone finally stood up to him. Sarah screenshot it, sent it to Jonathan, and closed her laptop. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she recognized the area code, same as her hospital. Sarah Miller. Mrs. Miller, this is Diane Chen from Human Resources. Do you have a moment? Sarah's stomach dropped. Of course. I wanted to reach out personally about the situation with your neighbors. It's gotten quite a bit of media attention. I'm aware. We've had several patients, and some staff members express concern. Some feel the publicity might be disruptive to the hospital's environment. Sarah closed her eyes. Are you firing me? No, nothing like that. Your work performance is excellent, but we would like to request that you refrain from discussing the situation while on hospital premises, and we'd appreciate if you didn't identify yourself as a hospital employee in any media appearances. I haven't identified myself as anything in media appearances, because I haven't done any media appearances. Ah, well, that's good to hear. Diane sounded relieved. In that case, just keep maintaining that professionalism and we'll have no issues. We support you, Sarah. What those people did to your property was wrong. We just need to make sure it doesn't affect your work. It won't. After hanging up, Sarah sat for a long moment, staring at her phone. The Hendersons had cost her peace, privacy, thousands of dollars, and now her employer was nervous about her. Even in victory, they were still taking from her. The anger that thought sparked was white-hot and clarifying. She called Jonathan Reeves. Sarah, I was just about to call you. The Hendersons' attorney reached out. They want to settle. Absolutely not. There was a pause. Sarah, they're offering $200,000. That's close to what we're asking, and it avoids a trial. I don't care if they're offering $1 million. I want this to go to court. I want a jury to see those videos. I want Marcus Henderson to have to sit in front of 12 strangers and explain why he thought he could do whatever he wanted to my property. A trial is risky. Juries are unpredictable. You told me we had an airtight case. We do, but... Then we're going to trial, no settlement. I want them to suffer through every single minute of this. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, approving, almost admiring. All right, I'll reject the settlement offer, but Sarah, you need to understand what you're signing up for. A trial means months of preparation, depositions, media scrutiny. It means the Hendersons' lawyers will try to make you look obsessive, vindictive, unstable. They'll dig into your divorce, your finances, your personal life. They'll try to paint you as the villain. Let them try. This will get ugly. It's already ugly. At least this way, everyone will see exactly who started it. She could hear him smiling. I'll file our rejection this afternoon. See you Friday for depositions. The depositions were held in Jonathan's conference room, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus and Brittany Henderson sat on one side of the table with their attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Vance, who looked like she ate opposing counsel for breakfast. Sarah sat on the other side with Jonathan, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Patricia started with the expected attacks. Mrs. Miller, isn't it true that you were recently divorced? Yes. And that divorce was contentious. Most divorces are. Your ex-husband filed a restraining order against you, didn't he? Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but her voice stayed level. He did. It was denied by the judge due to lack of evidence. But he claimed you were obsessive and controlling. He claimed many things. The court disagreed. Patricia smiled like a shark. Did you install surveillance cameras on your ex-husband's property during the marriage? I installed cameras on my property. He lived there at the time. Without his knowledge. I didn't require his permission to install security equipment on property I owned. Patricia flipped through her notes. You work as a nurse, correct? How much do you make annually? Around $60,000. Yet you spent $3,000 on surveillance equipment to watch your neighbors. Don't you find that a bit excessive? I find months of trespassing and property damage excessive. The cameras were a necessary investment to protect my home. Or were they an investment in creating evidence for this lawsuit? Isn't it true you were planning this lawsuit from the beginning? Jonathan interjected. Mrs. Miller is allowed to document crimes being committed on her property. There's no legal prohibition against gathering evidence. Patricia turned her attention to Marcus. Mr. Henderson, did Mrs. Miller ever directly tell you to stop using her pool? Marcus, who'd been sitting in sullen silence, leaned forward. No. She called the cops that one time, but she never actually talked to me about it like a normal person. Sarah couldn't help herself. I did talk to you. You laughed in my face and told me to take a chill pill. That's a lie. It's on video. Camera 3, timestamp August 14th, 3:47 p.m. Marcus's face went red. Patricia put a hand on his arm to silence him. Let's talk about the night of the alleged vandalism, Patricia continued. You drained your pool that afternoon, didn't you, Mrs. Miller? I had it drained for maintenance. The tile needed repair. Isn't it true you drained it specifically because you knew my clients were planning to use it? How would I know their plans? You tell me. You seem to know everything they do. Sarah met Patricia's eyes steadily. I know what my cameras record. Your clients made themselves predictable. The deposition went on for 4 hours. Patricia tried every angle, portraying Sarah as obsessive, vengeful, mentally unstable. She brought up Sarah's work schedule, suggesting she was too tired to think clearly. She questioned Sarah's financial motives, implying the lawsuit was a cash grab. But every attack bounced off the evidence. The videos were irrefutable, the timeline was clear, and Sarah's calm, measured responses made Patricia's aggressive tactics look desperate. When Brittany's deposition came, she was less composed. Mrs. Henderson, why did you post about this situation on social media before the case was filed? Jonathan asked. I was upset. My husband was in jail. You claimed he was being held on false charges. Were you aware at the time that there was video evidence of him spray painting Mrs. Miller's property? I didn't know about the videos. But you knew he'd been using her pool without permission. Brittany's lawyer objected, but Brittany answered anyway. Yes, but it was just a pool. She wasn't using it. What's the harm? What's the harm in using someone else's property without permission? It's not like we stole anything. Actually, you used her water, her electricity for the pool pump, her pool chemicals, her furniture. That's thousands of dollars of resources. Did you ever offer to compensate her? We offered to fix the fence. But you never actually fixed it, did you? We were going to. When? You'd been using the pool for 6 months. When exactly were you planning to repair the damage you'd caused? Brittany dissolved into tears. Her lawyer called for a break. During the break, Sarah stood by the window looking out at the city. Jonathan joined her. You're doing great, he said quietly. Vance is throwing everything she has at you and nothing's sticking. She's going to get worse, isn't she? Probably, but here's the thing, the worse she gets, the more sympathetic you look. You're calm, factual, reasonable. They're emotional, defensive, entitled. The contrast is stark. Sarah nodded, watching traffic flow in the streets below. When does this go to trial? Judge set a date this morning, March 15th, 4 months from now. 4 months of this, 4 months of lawyers, reporters, stress. 4 months of watching the Hendersons squirm. I can wait, Sarah said. Over the next 3 months, Sarah watched the Hendersons' lives continue to implode. Marcus's investor followed through on forcing a sale of the third dealership. It sold for less than it was worth. Distressed sale, bad publicity, and Marcus barely broke even after paying off loans. His other 2 dealerships saw sales drop by 40%. Turns out people didn't want to buy cars from someone they'd watched commit crimes on viral videos. Brittany lost more sponsorships. Her Instagram following dropped from 47,000 to 31,000 as people unfollowed in droves. The ones who stayed mostly left hateful comments. They put their house up for sale in February. Sarah watched the realtor's sign go up from her window. She felt nothing. Or maybe she felt everything. Vindication and grief and exhaustion and triumph all mixed together until she couldn't tell them apart anymore. Her life had changed too. She'd done 2 media interviews, both focused on property rights and the importance of documentation. Both times, she'd presented herself exactly as she was, a middle-aged nurse who'd stood up to bullies and won. The response was overwhelmingly positive. She'd received hundreds of emails and messages from people sharing their own stories of neighbor disputes, thanking her for giving them hope that justice was possible. But there were dark messages too, death threats, accusations, people who thought she was a vindictive monster destroying a family over nothing. Sarah read them all and deleted them without responding. In March, 1 week before the trial, Patricia Vance made another settlement offer. $250,000, full payment within 30 days, public apology from both Marcus and Brittany, admission of wrongdoing. Sarah read the offer and almost laughed. Counteroffer, she told Jonathan, $275,000, the full amount we're asking, payment in full within 15 days. Written apology to be published on their social media accounts, admitting to all trespassing and vandalism and expressing genuine remorse. Plus, they have to pay my legal fees. They'll never accept that. Then we'll see them in court. They didn't accept. On March 15th, Sarah Miller walked into the courthouse wearing a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back, her expression calm. She was ready. The courtroom was smaller than Sarah had expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lighting, rows of benches that looked like church pews. Judge Martha Reynolds presided, a woman in her late 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The jury filed in 12 people who would decide the Hendersons' fate. Sarah studied them, a mix of ages, backgrounds, 6 women and 6 men. A retired teacher, a construction worker, a young tech entrepreneur, an elderly black woman who reminded Sarah of her grandmother. These were the people who would watch the videos. These were the people who would decide what justice looked like. Marcus and Brittany sat at the defense table, both dressed conservatively. Marcus in a dark suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly mortgage. Brittany in a modest dress, her Instagram-famous hair pulled into a simple ponytail, minimal makeup. They looked like different people from the ones in the videos, humbled, chastened. Sarah knew it was an act. Patricia Vance stood for her opening statement, her voice warm and reasonable. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control. Yes, my clients made mistakes. They used their neighbor's pool without explicit permission. That was wrong, and they acknowledge it. But what happened next? The systematic surveillance, the calculated traps, the public humiliation, that goes far beyond reasonable response to a property dispute. She gestured to Sarah. Mrs. Miller spent $3,000 on surveillance equipment. She planned for months. She deliberately drained her pool knowing my clients would be hosting guests. She's seeking $250,000 for damage that amounts to a few $1,000s of repairs. This isn't about justice. This is about revenge. Jonathan Reeves stood for the prosecution, his presence commanding despite his average height. Ms. Vance is right about one thing. This is about revenge, but not Mrs. Miller's revenge. This is about what happens when wealthy, entitled people decide that rules don't apply to them, when they can take what they want because their neighbor is just a divorced nurse who won't fight back. He pulled up the first video on the large screen at the front of the courtroom. The defense will tell you this was a misunderstanding, but misunderstandings don't happen 47 times. That's how many instances of trespassing we have documented. 47 separate occasions where the defendants deliberately violated Mrs. Miller's property rights. The video played, Marcus cutting through the fence clear as day. Misunderstandings don't involve bolt cutters. Another video, the party on the night of the vandalism, drunk people streaming through Sarah's yard. And misunderstandings definitely don't involve spray painting profanity on someone's door and urinating on their property. The courtroom was silent except for the damning audio from the video. Marcus's voice, loud and clear. That crazy bitch drained her pool. Jonathan let it play for a few more seconds, then turned off the screen. Over the next few days, you're going to see hours of footage. You're going to hear testimony about the emotional and financial toll this took on Mrs. Miller. And you're going to have to decide, does being wealthy mean you can do whatever you want? Or do property rights still matter in America? The trial moved quickly. Jonathan had organized his evidence with military precision. Day 1, establishing the timeline. Sarah testified about the first incidents, the police response, her attempts to handle it reasonably. The jury watched video after video, people swimming in her pool at all hours, trash left on her deck, the cut fence. Day 2, the escalation, the drain and the vandalism. Sarah's voice stayed steady as she described watching the spray painting happen on her phone while at work. The jury's faces were stone. Day 3, the impact. Financial damages, receipts for every repair. Emotional testimony about feeling unsafe in her own home, the stress of months of violation. The hospital HR representative testified that Sarah's work had never been affected despite the situation, a subtle reinforcement that she was stable, professional, functioning. Day 4, the defense's turn. Patricia Vance called Marcus to the stand. Mr. Henderson, did you intend to harm Mrs. Miller? No, absolutely not, we just thought. I mean, she wasn't using the pool, it seemed wasteful. Did you know she objected to you using it? Not clearly. She called the police that one time, but I thought maybe we could work it out, neighbor to neighbor. But she never tried to talk to you after that. No, she just started surveilling us. It felt obsessive. Jonathan's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Henderson, you testified that you didn't know Mrs. Miller objected to your pool use. But isn't it true she told you directly to stop on August 14th? I don't remember. Let me refresh your memory. Jonathan played the video. There was Sarah standing in her yard asking them to leave and never come back. There was Marcus laughing, telling her to take a chill pill. Marcus's face went red. I was drunk. You were trespassing. Sober or drunk doesn't change that. Let's talk about the night you were arrested. Why did you spray paint Mrs. Miller's property? I was angry. I'd been looking forward to the party and the pool was empty. It felt like she did it just to mess with us. She did it to her own pool, on her own property. Well, yes, but... So you committed vandalism because your neighbor exercised her property rights. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, Mr. Henderson, you were thinking very clearly. You were thinking that you could do whatever you wanted because nobody had stopped you before. Isn't that right? Marcus didn't answer. Brittany's testimony was equally damaging. She cried, she apologized, but under cross-examination, the entitlement shone through. We would have stopped if she'd just been nice about it, Brittany said through tears. Being nice, Jonathan repeated. You mean she should have asked politely for you to stop trespassing on her property? She didn't have to install all those cameras. She had every legal right to install cameras on her property. What she didn't have to accept was months of violation. It was just a pool. That belonged to her, not you. The defense rested after 2 days. They'd had no good answers, no compelling narrative beyond, we made mistakes, but she overreacted. Closing arguments came on day 7. Patricia Vance made her final appeal to sympathy. My clients are suffering enough. They've lost their business, their reputation, their home. Yes, they were wrong. But does that wrong really justify a $250,000 judgment? Jonathan Reeves stood and faced the jury directly. Ms. Vance asks if the punishment fits the crime, but she's asking the wrong question. The question is, what is Mrs. Miller's peace of mind worth? What is the sanctity of her home worth? What is the value of the message we send about property rights? He pulled up the final video, Marcus spray painting "Psycho Bitch" on Sarah's door. The defendants want you to feel sorry for them. They want you to see them as victims of an overreaction. But I want you to imagine something. Imagine coming home from work, exhausted from saving lives at a hospital and finding this on your door. Imagine months of strangers in your backyard, trash in your pool, your boundaries violated again and again. Imagine asking for help and being laughed at. He paused, letting it sink in. Mrs. Miller didn't overreact. She documented crimes. She sought legal remedy. She did everything right. The defendants are suffering consequences of their own actions, not her vindictiveness. He turned to look at Marcus and Brittany. They gambled that she wouldn't fight back. They lost. That's not injustice, that's accountability. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Sarah sat in a conference room down the hall with Jonathan, drinking bad coffee and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Juries were unpredictable. They might think she'd gone too far. They might award her nothing. They might. "The jury's back," a bailiff said. Sarah's heart hammered as they filed back into the courtroom. She tried to read their faces and couldn't. Judge Reynolds addressed the jury foreman, a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honors." "On the count of trespassing, how do you find?" "We find for the plaintiff, Mrs. Miller." "On the count of property damage?" "For the plaintiff." "On the count of emotional distress?" "For the plaintiff." "And on the matter of damages?" The foreman looked directly at Sarah. "We award the plaintiff the full amount requested, $275,000, plus punitive damages of an additional $150,000 for a total of $425,000. The courtroom erupted. Patricia Vance was on her feet objecting. Brittany burst into tears. Marcus sat frozen, his face gray. Sarah felt like she was floating, untethered from reality. Judge Reynolds banged her gavel. "Order! The jury has spoken. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, you are ordered to pay the plaintiff $425,000 within 60 days. Should you fail to pay, assets will be seized to satisfy the judgment. Court is adjourned." Jonathan grabbed Sarah's arm, grinning. "We won, Sarah, we won big." She nodded, unable to speak. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Sarah gave a brief statement. "This was never about the money. This was about standing up for yourself when powerful people think they can take what they want. I hope this sends a message that property rights matter, that boundaries matter, that ordinary people can fight back and win." Then she got in her car and drove home. 3 months later, Sarah sat on her back deck, the evening sun warm on her face. Her pool was full again, the water crystal clear. New fence, professional grade. New security cameras, visible this time a deterrent. The Hendersons' house had sold. They'd moved 2 states away, their lives in shambles. The judgment had taken everything. The house sale barely covered the amount owed, plus legal fees, plus Marcus's remaining business debts. Sarah had received a check for $425,000. After legal fees and costs, she'd netted about $370,000. She'd put most of it in savings, paid off her mortgage, donated $50,000 to a domestic violence shelter for other people trying to rebuild their lives after feeling powerless. She kept $20,000 for one specific purpose. The new diving board was top of the line. Professional grade, the kind you saw at public pools. She'd had it installed last week. Now she stood on it, looking down at the water, wearing a swimsuit for the first time in 2 years. She thought about Marcus Henderson, probably working some middle management job now, his empire gone. She thought about Brittany, her Instagram dead, her influencer dreams evaporated. She thought about every time she'd felt small, powerless, invisible. Then she bounced once, twice, and dove into her pool. The water was perfect. When she surfaced, she was smiling. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "I saw your story on the news. I'm dealing with nightmare neighbors, too. Can I ask you for advice?" Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed, "Document everything. Trust yourself, don't back down. And remember, they're counting on you to give up. Don't." She hit send and set her phone down. The sun was setting, painting her backyard in gold and orange. Her backyard, her pool, her peace. Sarah leaned back, floating on the surface, and thought about justice. It had been expensive, exhausting, consuming, and worth every single second. Somewhere across town, in a rented apartment instead of their former mansion, Marcus Henderson stared at his phone, reading the latest article about the Pool Wars case that had destroyed his life. The comments were merciless. No one felt sorry for him. Everyone sided with Sarah Miller, the nurse who'd taken on her rich neighbors and won. He wanted to be angry, to blame her, to see himself as the victim. But late at night, when he was honest with himself, he knew the truth. He'd done this to himself. Every choice, every trespass, every act of casual disrespect for someone else's boundaries. He'd gambled that she was too weak, too tired, too powerless to fight back. He'd been wrong. And that miscalculation had cost him everything. Brittany came out of their bedroom, swollen eyes red from crying. "Marcus," the bankruptcy attorney called again. He nodded without looking at her. "I'll call him tomorrow." Outside their window, the city hummed with life, indifferent to their suffering. And across town, in a house with a sparkling pool and reinforced fences, Sarah Miller slept the sleep of the righteous, her justice complete.